There were 7 facing 3. In the dream, as it had been in life, yet there were no ordinary 3. They waited before the round tower, the red mountains of Dorne at their backs, their white cloaks blowing in the wind, and these were no shadows, their faces burned clear even now. Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, had a smile on his lips. The hilt of the greatsword Dawn poked up over his right shoulder. Sir Oswald Went was on one knee, sharpening his blade with a whetstone. Across his white enameled helm, the black bat of his house spread its wings. Between them stood fierce old Sir Gerald Hightower, the White Bull, Lord Commander of the King's Guard. "I looked for you on the Trident," Ned said to them. "We were not there," Sir Gerald answered. "Woe to the usurper if we had been," said Sir Oswald. "When King's Landing fell, Sir Jaime slew your king with a golden sword, and I wondered where you were." "Far away," Sir Gerald said, "or Aerys would sit on the Iron Throne, and all false brother would burn in 7 Hells." Alright, well, I can't really keep those voices up, but that was a quote from Eddard Stark, or Jon Snow's supposed father. It was chapter 39 in A Game of Thrones. In this video, I want to quickly discuss what happened at the Tower of Joy, a historical comparison, and what are my thoughts on the whole thing. Before we get started, please slap a like on this video if you watch this and decide you like it, and also make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications turned on, so that way you'll get an alert every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. Now, for those of you who are unaware, the Tower of Joy is a round tower, and it was located in the northern edge of the Red Mountains of Dorne. It was near the north end of the Prince's Pass, with Kingsgrave to the south and Nightsong to the north. Now, some of the history or the background on the Tower of Joy includes that the actual structure itself was named by Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, Jon Snow's real father. Debate me down in the comment section. Now, the structure itself is nothing really special, as it was just a round tower. But what happened at the Tower of Joy is super special. This is what many call the birth of Jon Snow. So basically, at the end of Robert's Rebellion, Ned and 6 of his buddies, those 6 including Howland Reed, Ethan Glover, Martin Cassell, Theo Wool, William Dustin, and I think Mark Ryswell. It's funny, the guy's named, has the same name as me, Mark, but I can't never remember his fucking name. So basically, they end up coming across this tower after the sack of King's Landing, where Ned tries to go there to liberate it, being sieged, but Tywin Lannister arrived there before him and wreaked bloody havoc, killed Rhaegar's children that he had from his marriage with Elia Martell. You raped her, you murdered her, you killed her children. While I'm getting sidetracked, the revenge that her brother Oberyn later seeks happens in the TV show as well, and I must say that just for that scene, you can also debate me down below, but I believe that the show did that fight scene way better than how it happened in the books. In the books, it's like 5 to 10 minutes of reading about how Oberyn is known as the Viper, and he moves around, and basically tries to tire out the mountain. Certain action scenes translate way better when they cross mediums. But after the end of Robert's Rebellion, when Rhaegar was killed at the Trident, there's I'll talk about that here in a little bit, but he goes down to King's Landing, discovers what Tywin Lannister had already committed crazy atrocities, so he continued on south onto Dorne to liberate his sister, who he heard was being held up at the Tower of Joy. So this is when he takes his 6 companions, and they arrive at the Tower of Joy, and they have that standoff from the clip that I was just quoting from the books, which is basically a badass Wild Wild West style showdown, because most of these warriors are pretty incredible, and the fact that only Howland Reed and Ned Stark survived this battle is pretty crazy. Now, if you want to go by what the show said happened, basically Ned stabbed Sir Arthur Dayne in the back, or I think it was Howland Reed or something like that, but I'm pretty sure that Dan and Dave just made it up, because in the books, Ned refers to this dream often, or he has like a fever dream, sort of, in Game of Thrones multiple times, and when he's referring to it, he's remembering different things about it, but we don't really get the full story of what exactly went down when he arrived at the Tower of Joy. We just know that he survived it with Howland Reed, who are Mira and Jojen Reed's father. Now, another thing that we know about the Tower of Joy from the books is that Ned actually built several cairns for all of the warriors, the great warriors who died at the Tower of Joy. And if you're unaware, a cairn is basically a mound, pile of rocks that are built as a memorial or a landmark, typically on top of a hilltop or a skyline. Now, the reason why I mention this is because Ned is a pretty honorable person, and I don't know if the fight went down the way way it did, and the fact that he respected these dudes enough to build funeral pyres for these fallen warriors shows that Ned is forever plagued with a sense of duty. I said duty. Speaking of duty, that's where the real mystery of the Tower of Joy comes in, because once Ned finished slaying Sir Arthur Dayne, who was at the time the greatest warrior in whoever existed in the Seven Kingdoms, he ends up going in and discovering that Lyanna is dying in the tower. And before her death, she makes a promise to Ned, and he keeps that promise, but he doesn't really reveal what that promise is. He just recalls "promise me" on multiple occasions. And the fact that he's so upset that he lost his sister is one of the only reasons how he's able to reconcile with his friend, King Robert I. And when I say reconcile, I mean Robert was a giant fucking cunt back then, and well, still is, all the way up until the main events when he dies. He basically looked at Lyanna one time and was like, "Oh, she's got a banging body and a cute face. I love her. I'm in love with her." Then some time passed, and he's able to convince Ned's father that maybe they should be betrothed to each other. And he does so. And when Lyanna finds out about this, she immediately says, "Well, I doubt he loves me truly, and he'll ever be able to keep it in his pants because he's already got a daughter, Maya Stone. When he was betrothed to Lyanna, he already had another daughter." So because Robert was such a douche, and Lyanna knew that their marriage would never really work out, and it was more of like a lustful thing and not really passion, when Rhaegar just crowned her the Queen of Love and Beauty at the Tourney of Harrenhal, known to some as the day that all the faces died, but this was before the events of Robert's Rebellion. This is what set the events into motion. But basically, Rhaegar knew that Robert and Lyanna had been betrothed to each other for a while, and he just decided to crown Lyanna as the new Queen of Love and Beauty, which, since Robert and her had been betrothed to each other, this was sort of seen as a slight. And ever since that moment, Robert, who was actually Prince Rhaegar's cousin, grew extremely cold towards him. And this is the precursor to the Robert's Rebellion, which basically happens when something like 10 leagues from the Tourney of Harrenhal, apparently Rhaegar supposedly abducts Lyanna and then, whisks her off, and they go and, according to the television show at least, get secretly married, which nullifies his marriage to Elia. And when he has Jon Snow is the legitimate heir to the Iron Throne. That hasn't really been hashed out completely in the books, but there are some other things that happen at the Tourney of Harrenhal. Just to quickly run through those, the tourney took place over 10 days, and the competition itself lasted 7 days, and 5 days were allowed just for the jousting section. There was a 7-sided melee in the traditional style, with Lord Robert Baratheon horsing many people. Besides the melee and the joust, the tourney included an archery contest, an axe throwing contest, a horse race, and a tournament of who can sing the best. There was also an acting show. But one of the things of note is that a mystery knight known as the Knight of the Laughing Tree appeared in the list to fight for the honor of the Chronicles. King Aerys sent men, including Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, to learn the identity of the mystery knight who appeared and disappeared mid-tourney, but they were supposedly never successful. Prince Rhaegar was the champion of the joust in the end and defeated 4 knights of the King's Guard. And this is when Rhaegar, of course, crowns Lyanna the Queen of Love and Beauty. Now, one thing should be noted, that supposedly Rhaegar never discovered the identity of this mystery knight. Well, most people believe that he did, and he discovered that it was Lyanna. Lyanna was a northern girl, nothing like her future niece, Sansa. She actually knew how to fucking fight, and she was actually defending the honor of Howland Reed, and a lot of people think that she dressed up in some armor that loosely fit her. The story's long, and we're supposed to be focusing on the Tower of Joy, so let's get back on track. And she was defending Howland Reed, who was getting bullied, which is why the mystery knight enlisted in the service of the Reeds, aka the Cronogmen. Shortly after this, and right outside the Tourney of Harrenhal, this is where Rhaegar, with 6 of his men, supposedly abduct Lyanna. I'm pretty sure it's more like, "Hey, you remember the other night when we kissed when I discovered that you were the mystery knight of the Laughing Tree? Well, do you want to continue our romance? I think that our houses should have been joined a long time ago, and according to every young maiden within 300 miles of here, I'm the hottest fucking thing since my ancestor Prince Daemon tried to conquest for the Iron Throne." And what I'm getting at is that Rhaegar likely courted Lyanna, and they decided to go down to Dorne because they figured that that would be a safe place away from the conquest that was happening with Robert's Rebellion. Well, Robert ended up killing Rhaegar in what was known as the Battle of the Ruby Ford. Rhaegar's corpse was later burned, as Targaryen tradition dictated, dictates. But of course, like everything in this story, a lot of people think Rhaegar's still alive, and I'm not going to talk about this video. I gotta get focused. Now, what's interesting is that Rhaegar named the Tower of Joy the Tower of Joy, Joy for a reason. I'm pretty sure he spent a while with Lyanna there, as Jon Snow wasn't born until 283 AC, and the actual tourney at Harrenhal happened in 281 AC. So that's like 2-some years or something. These two were living in Dorne and bliss. And for any of those who doubt my theory about Rhaegar courting Lyanna, and it's not just my theory, a lot of other people share it, but if there's any doubt for you, let me give you a historical comparison. That being King Arthur. Almost every single story that was written that comes from England or that's written about English history was inspired by King Arthur. In particular, the Joyous Gard, or de la Joie. Pardon my French. Get it? But the Joyous Guard is actually mentioned in the Prose Lancelot from the French Joyous Gard and other variants. It's basically a castle featured in the Matter of Britain literature in King Arthur. It was introduced in the 13th century French prose Lancelot as the home and formidable fortress of the hero Lancelot after his conquest of it from the forces of evil. Le Mot d'Arthur identified it with Bomberg Castle. Now, according to legend, the Joyous Guard is given its name by young Lancelot, much like Rhaegar in the Tower of Joy, when he sets up household at the castle. This was shortly after he discovered his own identity. He does it after single-handedly capturing it against all odds and ending its evil enchantment to task to prove his knighthood to King Arthur. Later on in this story, Lancelot ends up having an adulterous and treasonous affair with King Arthur's wife, Queen Guinevere. Lancelot rescues Guinevere, who is under the sentence of death from King Arthur because obviously he cheated on him, and he ends up bringing her to the Joyous Guard. Now, Robert does have a few comparisons to King Arthur, but not so much because he wasn't in line to be the king or anything like that when Rhaegar does this. He had just been betrothed, which one could argue that with the combination of House Baratheon and House Stark, the North being the largest of all the other 6 kingdoms, they would have a lot of power if Robert Baratheon and Lyanna Stark had joined their houses at that time. But Rhaegar rescuing her, much like Lancelot did with Queen Guinevere, is very telling. In the sense that Rhaegar was not known to be a raper and like someone who kidnapped people, as he did with, he followed traditional Targaryen tradition, which was to court women and romanticize them or wine and dine these hoes. When you take all that into consideration, I'm pretty sure the Tower of Joy didn't exactly happen as how Ned's remembering, or the parts that he's remembering, and what is put down in the history books as Rhaegar kidnapping Lyanna and raping her. Anyway, that takes up my time, and I'm gonna get out of here. I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video. The like goal is going to be 420 if you've watched this far and you decided that you like it, of course. And also, make sure you're subscribed and have your notifications turned on, so that way you'll get an alert every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. And also, consider watching one of these videos right here. I recently started covering a new series entitled Raised by Wolves, and in my opinion, that show is the best new show of 2020. Thanks again for watching. My name is Mark, and this has been Thrones Reviews. I was a legend in Janelle. A fucking legend. Any man, anytime.